Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Power Core Productions and Podcastings. I am your host, Javon Harrington, back to hit you with another video. And today we are going to be continuing What If Deku Was Iron Man? My Hero Academia Armored Adventures Part 8. But first and foremost, if you're a fan of the channel and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is Power Core Productions and Podcastings that has to come out now and in the future. Now, last week I did say that I wanted this part to be the finale, and I had been writing the script for it to be the finale. But ultimately, though, this is not going to be the finale. Part 9 is actually going to be the finale. And the reason for that is quite simple. That is that I am still not doing well. I'm doing much better. My bronchitis, it's not as bad as it was a couple of days ago. But still, I'm kind of congested right now. And it's kind of hurting my voice to record for a really long time. This video is already approaching 50 minutes plus. And I still wasn't able to get through all the script. I only got about halfway through. So ultimately, I'm just deciding to wait one more week and just go through with part 9. But part 9 will definitely be the finale. But still, though, do apologize. Hopefully, I'll be feeling better. I mean, I already am feeling better. So hopefully, as the week goes on, I'll be getting a lot more stronger and better. But right now, I think it's just for the best to do a part 8, if you will, and we'll finish the second half in part 9. But anyway, we are entering into the final parts of this series as we enter into the final battle, the three-way deadlock between All For One, All Might, and the Mandarin, with our heroes close behind not too long after. As we now enter into the final stages, as we approach the Multiverse of Madness storyline, we have much to look forward to. More series to come, new heroes that are going to be making their appearances, and all of that good stuff. So I do hope you'll stay tuned for everything that is to come now and in the future. But anyway, without further ado, we're going to get straight into today's video. So as always, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. To say that everything was in an uproar would be a massive understatement. Izuku sat in the hospital. The man who had served as his family's butler and trusted advisor, Jarvis, he sadly had now passed. And worst of all, his best friends had been kidnapped by the enemy, as well as his mother. For Izuku, he wondered how everything had gotten to this point. How had everything gone so wrong? He thought that he could live up to his father's ideals, be the hero that the world needed. But yet it seemed as though the more he tried, the more that he failed. Based off of the intel he was able to gather, it was the work of not only All For One, but also the Mandarin. In all likelihood, they were going to be making their acquaintance rather soon. All For One and his league of villains had managed to kidnap Katsuki Bakugo, as well as Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi, fellow hero, but also son of the warlord known as the Mandarin, who was after 10 artifacts known as the Makuan rings. Powerful rings, each one with a stone that has a power over a unique element. If he gathered all 10 rings, he would obtain godhood and be nearly unstoppable. For Izuku and his friends, they had been spending their time trying to find the rings, trying their best to be the new guardians. On top of that, Izuku's close friend Momo Yaoyorozu had undertaken the responsibility of becoming the next wielder of One for All. But now things had only gotten worse. Following the attack on the summer camping trip that had to be brought to an end, 2 students now kidnapped by villains, as well as a student's mother kidnapped by another set of villains. Izuku found himself running out of options. As they had gone to visit others in the hospital, and Izuku was recovering himself, the other students couldn't sit idly by, among them being Kirishima, who wanted to get his friend back by any means. However, it left those in the class rather divided. They weren't sure of what to do. They weren't sure of what would be the best option. Izuku said nothing. He simply watched as the students talked amongst themselves. He was watching for a specific reason. He waited, and as the room started to clear, Izuku knew what he had to do. After he left the hospital, Izuku went back to UA. He met with Mei Hatsume as she was still working in the lab. He had been working on a new suit, a prototype if you will. It could be revolutionary in some regard, but on the other hand, a suit of this magnitude was something that required a bit more testing, but honestly, he didn't have time. As Izuku prepared his things, he made his way to the dorm rooms, and there was a certain room that he stopped to. This was the room of none other than Yuga Aoyami. Aoyami, fellow student of UA, whose quirk was that of naval laser. Izuku knocked on the door, and surprisingly, Aoyami was there. He asked to be let inside, and he closed the door behind him, telling him that he wanted to talk to him for a bit, ask him about what happened during the night of the attack. Of course, Aoyami gave his story, telling him of where he was and everything else all the same. But you see, not being without a quirk, Izuku picked up on a lot of things. A lot more than you would be expecting. Now you may be wondering, why was Izuku able to pick up on things here that he couldn't in the original? Well, the answer is quite obvious. Being born without a quirk, Izuku had to pay more than the usual attention. You see, Izuku couldn't afford to be reckless, not with everything that was at stake. While the police and everyone else were doing their own investigations, Izuku had been doing his as well. As far back as the USJ attack. To the untrained eye, it seemed like a random villain attack. But, if you looked closely enough, you would know otherwise. A place like the USJ, where the students and where All Might was going to be, that was no mere coincidence. The villains arriving with an All Might capable destroying monster, that was almost too good to be true. But still, if UA really was to have a traitor, who could it possibly be? Izuku had been keeping his eyes and ears to the ground. He didn't want to arouse suspicion. After all, he could be wrong, and there could be no traitor. But if there was, he didn't want to let them know that he had caught on to them. But sure enough, he figured everything out. He was able to pinpoint and triangulate where certain calls were coming and going from out of the remoteness of the camp. And in every position, there always seemed to be where Aoyami was closest to. Of course, Izuku could not confirm or deny his suspicions just yet. After all, that wouldn't be the only line of proof. But from what he had learned from All Might about how All for One moved, how he operated, there was something else that he noticed about Aoyami as well. And that was the fact that his quirk didn't really seem comparable to his body. And what was more so, when he had done research about Aoyami's past and his family, he was surprised to learn that neither one of his parents would have even had a quirk that would have been capable of giving Aoyami such a power. You see, when it comes to quirk biology, when you look closely enough, a child's powers are not random. For example, take Shoto Todoroki. His mother was an ice user, his father a fire user. The only outcomes realistically that you should get is a child that can use fire, or a child that can use ice, a mutation, that being Shoto, who can use both, or you might end up having a child who's quirkless. That is a possibility. But you should never have a child that can be able to move rocks. That's simply not an outcome you could get. Quirks were just as much biology than anything else. You could only get what was there, nothing more, nothing less. And neither one of Aoyami's parents had any type of quirk or quirk history that would allow for Aoyami to use naval laser. And furthermore, when he did closer inspection, it almost seemed as though naval laser wasn't naturally built for his body. Everyone's body is built for their quirk specifically. Look at Katsuki Bakugo. His body was made specifically to use explosion. But for Aoyami, it was almost as if he were merely trying to contain a power, like he hadn't been built with one. And from Izuku's deductions, seeing how Momo was adjusting to using One for All, it wasn't hard to see the resemblance in how they used their quirks. The way that Momo was testing the waters to see just how far she could use her abilities, it was the same with Aoyami. It was almost as if this quirk didn't come naturally to him at all, like it was something that was given to him. Once Izuku had all of this information put together, it was easy enough for him to confront his comrade about it. He asked Aoyami for the truth, telling him that he had figured it out, who the traitor was. Of course, now Aoyami couldn't deny it. He simply smiled. It was a weak smile, as he looked up towards Izuku, who was not pleased at the moment. Aoyami understood what he had done. Because of him, 2 of Izuku's friends were now in the hands of the enemy. But even more so, his mother had been caught in the crossfire as well. Of course, he didn't blame him for his mother, though. He understood that that was another issue. But still, he had to confront him all the same. Aoyami revealed that he too was born quirkless, and that his parents had made a deal with All for One. And in doing so, he was gifted a quirk. But this quirk was also more of a curse than anything else. For you see, if All for One wanted to, he could use him and destroy him just as easily. Izuku now understood the truth and why he had done what he had done. And at the same time, Izuku also realized that this was something that could not easily be dissuaded. Aoyami asked what Izuku was going to do now that he knew the truth. Turning him over to the authorities would be the all but most likeliest of outcomes. Izuku explained that that day may come, but now was not the time. He asked what was he going to do now. That was the most important part. Aoyami looked at him and asked what he meant by this. Izuku explained that a lot was going to happen in the coming days. A lot was going to change. And depending on his decisions right now, it just might determine where he would be when it was all said and done. Izuku made it very clear. He had two targets. The Mandarin and All for One. He was sick of both of their games, and it was time to put an end to it once and for all. That was what he planned to do. And he asked quite simply, was Aoyami going to get in his way? Because if he was going to put an end to that here and now. Aoyami wasn't sure what to say or what to do in that moment. Izuku was basically giving him a warning him that if he stood in his way ever again, then he was going to be dealt with. For Aoyami, he didn't want this anymore. He wanted it to stop. He wanted this to be over. Izuku could tell by this, as he looked back at him. He told him that if he promised never to do this again, then he would help him. He would free him of this curse once and for all. But that was only if he was going to stand by the side of the heroes and be an ally. Aoyami was grateful, more so than he had ever been in his life. He had been given a chance he knew he didn't deserve, but still he had one, and he knew he had to take it. He accepted the offer and promised that he would be on the straight and narrow. And with that, Izuku would leave him. Izuku went to the workshop of UA. After meeting with Mei Hatsume, he went to confirm if what he had asked for had been complete. His upgrades were now all in order. It was all neatly compact and put together in the form of a red and gold wristwatch. Izuku placed it on his arm, and he took a black metal cube and held it on his shoulders. After taking the watch and the cube, Izuku was making his way to leave. It was just under nightfall. Izuku knew that he only had but so much time. He stopped at the phone and made a call to an old friend. He had been away for a while, practicing on a new skill he acquired, and it seemed as though now it was going to have to come to use for him. As Izuku was finished making the call, he made his way out to leave. But he realized soon after that there were others who were waiting for him. As he walked out of the dorm rooms, Izuku turned and saw that Momo, Tenya Ida, Kirishima, Uraraka, Sue, as well as T'Challa and Todoroki were there as well, along with Melissa. All of them standing there together. They looked at Izuku. They didn't need to ask what he was going to do, because they already knew it. Momo walked up to Izuku, worried in her eyes as she looked to him. Izuku, we know what happened. Were you really just going to go off on your own? It's not like I didn't want to ask, but in all honesty, I feel as though this is something... Izuku, you can't do it all by yourself. You need others to help you. Ida walked up amongst them both. What do you mean by help? Izuku, what exactly are you planning here? I'm going to go rescue my mother, and I am going to stop the Mandarin and All for One. Are you crazy? Izuku, what exactly are you trying to prove here? I understand that Shang and Bakugo are your friends. They're mine as well. But you can't just go off and do whatever you want on your own. I'm sorry, Ida, but I'm not asking for your permission. What? And just what exactly am I to you then, huh? Who was the one who told me not to go off and do anything recklessly on my own? And yet now here you are, thinking that you can just do everything on your own, huh? Just what the hell is wrong with you? Ida grabbed Izuku by the collar. Everyone was shocked by Ida's rage and how angered he was towards him. Izuku said nothing. Ida, in anger, punched him in the face. And just what? You're going against the rules. You're going against the law. Are you that careless? Even Sue would chime in as well, as she understood Izuku's feelings and concerns. But in the end of the day, they had to be heroes and leave this to the pros. However, Izuku looked at the both of them in anger. So what am I supposed to do, huh? Not do anything for my mother or my friends? Sitting around doing nothing. Oh, that's rich. That's so rich. Everyone was shocked by Izuku's words. Of all people, they didn't think that Izuku would be the one to buck against the system. But Izuku had had enough. You know, I don't agree with Stain. I really don't. I think he's really messed up in the head. But you know what? He was right about one thing. Most of the heroes of today, they're cowards. They have no backbone, nothing to speak of at all. Ida looked at him with anger. So what? You think my brother wasn't a hero? It's not about your brother. Of course your brother is a hero. Anyone with eyes could see that. But it's this weak cowardice of this era that I can't stand. All my life, I was told that I would never be able to be a hero because I was quirkless and that I couldn't do anything. Well, guess what? I can. I do it with my own power, not with anyone else's. And you know something? You're right. I could sit here. I could do absolutely nothing. And in the eyes of everyone, I'd be justified. So what if my mother dies? So what if Bakugo and Shang die? It's not my fault. It's not my problem. I'm only doing what the law told me to do, right? Huh? Is that what I'm supposed to tell myself? You think I can live like that? You think I want to live like that? I don't want to hide behind stupid laws. I don't want to wake up at night and try to justify me being a coward and not doing what I could. You want to call me a villain? Well, go on ahead, because I don't care. I am going to save those I care about. I am going to be there for the ones that need me. Because I am a hero, damn it. And no one is going to tell me otherwise. And if you got a problem with that, then we can settle it when I get back. So unless you're going to help me, Ida, get out of my way. And don't try to stop me. Ida was surprised by Izuku's words. Everyone was. This determination in his face. This was not the young boy that shriveled up and cried years ago. No. These were the eyes of a man. of a young man who had been through the worst of the worst, and who now was no longer going to hide behind flimsy laws and rules. For Momo in that moment, she understood. She could finally see what she had always known about Izuku. It didn't matter what the odds were. It didn't matter what he was up against. In the end, Izuku was always going to stand and do what was right. Even though she had been chosen, she knew without a shadow of a doubt if there was anyone who would have been worthy of one for all, it would be him. Momo walked beside Izuku and held his hand, telling him that wherever he went, she was going to go as well. Kirishima was already going to go. So was T'Challa, as well as Todoroki. Uraraka was going to stay behind, along with Sue. And now this only left Ida. Melissa chimed in as well, stating that she was going to go. Like her father, she too was a guardian now. Of course, they knew that this could be dangerous, but in the end, the group had already made up their mind. Ito was left shaking. He knew he couldn't abandon his friends, but at the same time, there were also the rules. But then he thought about his brother for a moment. And in all honesty, if this were his family, he'd do the same thing. He decided that he would join Izuku as well. Once it was decided, the group would make their way out immediately. Thankfully, Momo had placed a tracker on one of the Nomu, and using a spare tracking device, they were going to be able to track down the location where the League of Villains were. In the meanwhile, in another hideout not too far from that of the League of Villains, Ghost was waiting as well. She was sitting with Inko Midoriya, the mother of Izuku Midoriya. Inko had learned many truths. To be honest, any other woman would have probably fainted. The fact that she was able to hold herself together was more than she could have been expecting. Ghost had decided to reveal the truth to her, how her husband died, and what her son was truly involved in. As far as Inko knew, she had always believed her husband was a regular businessman who died tragically in a plane accident. But no, that was far from the case. And now it seemed as though her family was in more trouble than ever. Her son Izuku, unsure of where he was or what he was doing. As a mother, she had always known that Izuku was into the more extreme side of things. She had always tried her best to look after him and to be a loving but supporting mother. She wondered why Izuku never told her the truth. Although deep down, she understood why. If she had known the truth about everything, how they had acquired their money, how her husband truly met his end, she would have took them far away and never let Izuku get involved in the hero life. But at the same time, she knew that was what her son wanted more than anything. Izuku had been carrying all of this responsibility on his own, and there was no telling just how much pain he was truly in. Ghost revealed that they had been doing their own research for a while now into that of Inko's late husband. They were soon able to find that he was indeed survived by a family. Once they were able to put the names to a face, it was simply a matter of finding them. Although they had no idea that His son would be none other than Izuku Midoriya, the boy starting to become world-renowned and known as Iron Man, the one of whom they had been searching after. As Ghost waited for orders from the Mandarin on what to do next, a boy would be sitting outside of a window, not too far off. He put his face guard on. On his back was a quiver of arrows. He took a deep breath and shot one arrow next to the side of the building. He moved around and shot more and more, until eventually he had them placed where he wanted them to. On each arrow, there was a special microphone that could pick up sounds. He waited until the villains were all walking about different areas of the perimeter. Using the arrows, he would begin to speak through them one by one. He spoke to Whirlwind, mocking and using the voice of Ghost. Whirlwind answered Ghost's question, and that was what he had been waiting for. After a while, the four group of villains would meet back with one another once again. Whirlwind said nothing, causing Death Dealer and Melter to ask what was going on with him. Whirlwind simply held up his hands and unleashed a massive tornado. The other villains had to move out of the way, and they had no idea what was going on, why Whirlwind was seemingly under control somehow. He said nothing as he continued to use more and more of his tornadoes. Inko moved out of the way and tried to take cover. Melter would use his gun, blasting his plasma ray attempting to stop him, as the two villains were now caught in a fight. Ghost would look to Death Dealer, telling him to watch after Inko Midoriya, while Ghost would try her best to break up the squabble between the two. As she did so, Death Dealer would move out of the way at the last moment as he was almost hit by an arrow. More of them started to flood into the room. Death Dealer would move out of the way again and again until eventually he looked out the window to see who was shooting at him. Some boy with purple hair, dressed in black and purple gear, with bow and arrow in hand, shot away at them. Death Dealer would see who was the assailant and would go after him at once. As he made his way outside, the two of them would engage with one another in combat. The boy was still getting used to fighting this new style, but still it was better than nothing. All the same, he waited and lured out his opponent, waiting for the opportune time to strike. When it seemed as though he was being caught on the back foot, that was when the next phase of his plan would begin. From out of nowhere, a discharge of electricity would go blasting towards Death Dealer, as another combatant had made his way. Well, it took you long enough. I assume Izuku told you everything? Yes, I am quite aware. Now go and save the mother. Leave him to me. T'Challa now stood ready for combat once again, the Black Panther and Death Dealer engaging one another once more, while Shinso ziplined and made his way inside. Melter and Whirlwind were still fighting, and Ghost was desperately trying to stop the two of them. As she was doing so, she would take note at the last second that someone else had entered into the building that they thought was secluded. From outside, she could see on another rooftop Death Dealer fighting with someone, as Inko Midoriya was being freed from her restraints. Inko was a bit worried as she saw the young hero saving her. Don't be worried, ma'am. I'm a friend of your son's. I'm here to rescue you. He grabbed her and the two of them would begin to make their way. However, with no choice, Ghost would go back to face against Shinso. Shinso moved Izuku's mother to safety as he engaged with the assassin. How were you able to find us so easily? Hey, what can I say? My friend plans ahead. You should have looked at the wedding ring. Ghost now realized that Inko had had a tracker on her this whole time. She had been careless. All the same, she engaged with Shinso once more. Although, the fight, it didn't last very long. Because the moment that she answered Shinso's question, she would find herself in a trance, unable to move. They fall for it every time. Anyway, you and your friends, why don't you take that fight elsewhere, alright? Thank you. Ghost would not say a word, and she simply went off and now fought with both Whirlwind and Melter. As Shinso and Inko made their way outside, they would go to safety as T'Challa would follow after them not too long after. Once having Inko Midoriya secluded and in safety, they would move her to UA immediately, where she would be safe. They would send a call to Izuku of where they were going, and that they would be joining him soon after. In the meanwhile, Izuku's group continued to follow after the tracker, knowing that this would lead them directly to where their friends were. With the League of Villains, they sat with both Shang-Chi as well as Bakugo, trying to convince them that this was the side that they should be on. At least with Bakugo, with all that hate and rage they had seen in him, they knew that he would be a good addition as a villain, and he'd be better off than being a hero. But with Shang, they had a few questions. When they searched him though, they realized he wasn't wearing the ring. Shigaraki was now a bit unnerved. He asked him where the ring was, and Shang smugly replied he had no idea what he was talking about. Shigaraki grabbed him by the wrist. He used decay only but for a second, and Shang felt the immense pain of his body decaying. Shigaraki explained that he had all night and had no problem waiting, but all the same, he wanted to know more about these Makuan rings as they were, where they had come from, and just who was the Mandarin. Bakugo and Shang looked at one another. They knew that it would be wise not to say anything. They simply waited to make their move. Once they felt as though they had an opening, Katsuki Bakugo would use his explosions and break free of his restraints, along with Shang-Chi. As he focused his chi all throughout his body, he amplified his strength and broke free as well as the two stood back to back. Bakugo remarked that there was no way in hell he'd ever join them. And Shang, he offered the same. The two of them realized they were going to be in for the fight of their lives, but all the same, this was going to be how they'd have to go out. At that very moment, as the two of them continued to fight off the villains, an unexpected guest would arrive as well, that being in the form of All Might. With the help from the other heroes, there was now a twofold raid that was taking place. All Might would storm the League of Villains hideout, attempting to save both Shang-Chi and Katsuki Bakugo. Tomura would taunt that in the end, All Might didn't have a clue, and that his master was going to be victorious in the end. From out of nowhere, Kurogiri would warp everyone away, All Might smashing through the hideout walls, attempting to chase after them. In the meanwhile, another group of heroes were raiding another hideout. They weren't sure of what they were going to find. However, who they had come into contact with was someone that they were not expecting. Best Genus would lead the charge into the Nomu factory, as they had come face to face with a new villain. A man well dressed in a tuxedo, wearing a mask that obscured his face. They attempted to bind and capture him, however this would not last for too long, as the villain they had captured was easily able to break free of the restraints that had been placed around him. Upon doing so, he revealed himself to be none other than All for One, and that he was grateful that they had arrived. For one hero in particular, that named Ragdoll, as he could make use of her quirk and abilities. As they continued on, Izuku and the others would make their way with the tracker, eventually being able to find where Bakugo and Shang-Chi were, as the two of them were fighting against the League of Villains. All Might would try to help him as well. However, by the time both he and Gran Torino had made it, they had realized that they were in an open area and field. And now, another enemy was joining the fray as well. That being none other than All for One. All Might looked at him angrily. His now old foe and rival had finally returned. But what was even more so was that this was not the only greeting that was being met. From out of nowhere, in the sky above, someone would come landing down in the rubble and debris. Shang-Chi looked on, and a sense of fear and dread washed over him, for he realized that the man in the black armor was none other than his father, the Mandarin. My, All Might, you really do know how to make enemies. So, to what do I owe the pleasure, Mandarin? It seems you've taken something that belongs to me. I'll be taking my son back now, as well as the last remaining Makuon rings. The Mandarin held up his left fist. On his gauntlet, Shang could see that he had already acquired 5 of the 10 Makuon rings, which meant that Shang's friends currently had the other 5. That's when another feeling of anxiety washed over him. If he knew Izuku the way that he did, then that meant Izuku was more than likely going to be making his way here to the battlefield. That was something he did not need to do, because if he showed up, in all likelihood the others were going to come as well, and that would literally be handing over ultimate power to a mad tyrant on a silver platter itself. The 3 ominous powers all stood across from one another. All Might, the Mandarin, and All for One. Izuku and his friends were hiding off not too far away. Both Shang-Chi and Bakugo were fighting against the League of Villains, while the 3 main forces were all sizing each other up. The Mandarin looked at both All Might and All for One. It seems you know who I am. And if you know who I am, then you know what I am after. To be honest, I wanted to wait. Wait until I had acquired all 10 of the Makuon rings before I engaged you. But, judging from your current state, I believe 50% will be more than enough to deal with the likes of you both. Cocky now, are we? My. I know you believe in the power of those rings of yours, but you'd be wise not to underestimate me. Villain scum, no matter what the era. It doesn't matter what either of your goals are, because I vow I will stop you both here and now. All Might began to charge himself up, as the vestiges of One for All were now within him. All for One began to manifest his power as well, and the Mandarin took his stand. Izuku and the others weren't sure of what to do next, as they felt the power from all three. They didn't even feel human anymore. It felt like they were monsters, and that this clash, this was about to be a battle between gods. Izuku, however, stilled his heart. He looked to his phone and realized he had gotten a call. His mother was now safe, and with that, he had no regrets now. As they got ready to jump in, the world now stood silent, as the final battle was now underway. This concludes What If Deku Was Iron Man? My Hero Academia Armored Adventures, Part 8. As always, if you're a fan of the channel and everything else that we have to offer, then please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, and hit that bell for post notifications so you can stay up to date on everything that is PowerCore Productions and Podcasting stats to come out now and in the future. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video, as we will be continuing and concluding Season 2 of What If Bel Crenel Was Thor? Danmachi the Last King. Season 2, Part 3, the Season 2 finale. But anyway, that's going to do it for the end of today's video. I'm Javon Harrington with PowerCore Productions and Podcastings, signing off, and I'll see you next time.